You do not say because you have nothing to say. You say it because your brain needs 1 second to find the next English thought, but your mouth is afraid to stay silent. So every thinking moment becomes you know. And slowly your answer starts sounding nervous even when you actually know what you want to say. The English filler trap will train you to stop filling every gap, use silence without panic, organize your next thought, and speak with a calmer, cleaner English rhythm. You do not need to remove every pause. You need to learn how to control the pause instead of filling it. Subscribe to English Mindset Academy if you are serious about real fluency. And in the comments write, "I will control the pause." Now let us begin. Chapter 1. Why appears before your real sentence does. Someone asks you a simple question. What do you usually do on weekends? You know the answer. You have enough vocabulary. But the moment you begin, your speech changes. Well, I usually, go out with my friends and, sometimes I. The problem is not that you have nothing to say. The problem is that your mouth starts speaking before your next thought is ready. There is a tiny space between one idea and the next. Your brain may need 1 second to choose a word, organize a thought, or decide what comes next. But instead of allowing that second to stay quiet, your mouth tries to cover it. That is where appears. And once you notice yourself doing it, another problem begins. Part of your mind starts judging your own speech. Why did I say that again? Do I sound nervous? Does my English sound weak? Now your attention is divided. One part of your brain is trying to communicate, while another part is watching and correcting you. Speaking becomes heavier, and even more fillers appear. This is the first mistake you need to recognize. You are treating thinking time like a speaking problem. Confident speakers need thinking time too. They do not always know the next sentence instantly. The difference is that they are more comfortable allowing a short pause. Imagine someone asks, "Why are you learning English?" One answer sounds like this. "I'm learning English because, I want to, improve my career," and, another speaker says, "I'm learning English because I want better opportunities." Pause. "And I also want to communicate confidently when I travel." Both people needed time to think, but one person filled that time with nervous sounds. The other person used silence to separate two clear ideas. That difference matters. A pause can make your speech sound controlled. A filler can make the same thinking moment sound uncertain. This does not mean that saying once is terrible. Fluent speakers use fillers too. Natural English contains well, I mean, and other small hesitation signals. The problem begins when they become automatic. Every time your brain thinks, every time you search for vocabulary, every time you prepare another idea, then the filler is no longer helping communication. It is controlling your rhythm. Another common mistake is trying to create the perfect sentence while you are already speaking. Someone asks, "What do you think about working from home?" You could simply say, "I like it because I can concentrate better." But your brain begins searching for something more impressive. Should I say, "From my perspective"? Maybe remote work provides several advantages. Is that grammar correct? While you are building and correcting different versions in your head, your mouth has nothing ready to say. So you hear, personally, I think. Sometimes simpler English actually sounds stronger because the thought arrives clearly. Instead of trying to create one complicated answer, break your idea into smaller pieces. I like working from home. Pause. I can focus better, and I save a lot of travel time. You are giving your brain a place to think between ideas instead of forcing it to think while your mouth keeps making noise. This leads to another important lesson. Do not try to keep one sentence alive forever. Some learners are afraid to finish a sentence because they think stopping means losing fluency. So they keep adding, and, because, and then, but fluent speaking is not one endless sentence. You can finish one idea, then begin another. For example, I started learning English 2 years ago because I needed it for work. Later, I decided to focus more on speaking. Now I practice almost every day. The pauses do not damage the answer. They organize it. There is another moment when fillers become very strong, when one word disappears. You are explaining something, then suddenly you cannot remember the exact vocabulary. You stop everything. I forgot Now the whole conversation is waiting for one missing word. But you do not always need the perfect word. If you forget charger, you can say, I forgot the thing I used to charge my phone. If you forget appointment, you might say, I have a meeting with my doctor tomorrow. The exact vocabulary can come later. Your first responsibility in conversation is to keep the meaning clear. This is a major change in speaking mindset. Do not ask, what is the perfect word? Ask, how else can I express this idea? That question gives your brain options, and when your brain has options, it panics less. Now try a small exercise. Answer this question aloud. What is one thing you want to improve about your English? But do not answer immediately. Give yourself 1 or 2 seconds. Then say one clear thought. I want to improve my speaking confidence. Pause, add another thought. I hesitate too much when I talk to people. Pause, then continue. I want to speak more calmly. Notice what you are training. You are not training yourself to speak faster. You are training yourself to let one idea finish before forcing the next one out. That is the beginning of controlled English. So when you hear yourself saying do not simply become angry with the filler. Use it as information. Ask yourself, was I searching for a word? Was I checking grammar? Was I trying to build a sentence that was too complicated? Did I begin speaking before I knew my first idea? Was I afraid that silence would make me look weak? The filler is often showing you exactly where your speaking system lost control. Once you can recognize that moment, you can begin changing it. And this is the first lesson of the English filler trap. You do not need to eliminate every hesitation. You need to stop treating every hesitation as something that must be hidden, because the real skill is not speaking without ever stopping. The real skill is knowing how to stop for a moment without losing control. And in the next chapter, we will work on the habit that makes fillers so difficult to remove, the feeling that every second of silence must contain a sound. Chapter 2. Stop trying to fill every second of silence. There is a moment in English conversation that makes many learners uncomfortable. You finish one thought. Your next thought is not ready yet. For 1 second, there is nothing, and immediately your mind says, say something, so your mouth obeys. Well, you know. Actually, the strange part is that you may not even need those words. You are not using them because they add meaning. You are using them because silence feels dangerous. That is the habit we need to change in this chapter. The problem is not only that you use fillers. The deeper problem is that you believe a good speaker should never leave empty space. So the second silence appears, you try to escape from it. But silence is not empty when you are speaking. Silence can mean, I am thinking, I am choosing my next idea, I have finished one point, I want this next sentence to be clear. A short pause can actually make your English sound more controlled because it gives both you and the listener time to process the message. Imagine someone asks, what did you think of the movie? You answer, I liked it because the story felt realistic. Then you need a moment to think of your second point. The old habit says, I liked it because the story felt realistic, and, I think, but you can simply do this. I liked it because the story felt realistic. Pause. The ending was also much better than I expected. That small silence did not weaken your answer, it improved it. The listener could understand the first idea clearly, and you had enough time to prepare the second one. This is one of the biggest speaking shifts you can make. Stop trying to hide your thinking time. Start using it. Think about what happens when you fill every gap. You finish a sentence, but instead of stopping, you immediately make another sound. So, now your mouth is active, and that creates pressure to continue. Your brain thinks, I have already started, I need the next sentence now. Then the next idea is still not ready, so another filler appears. Now you feel even more nervous. This creates a chain. Pause, fear, filler, pressure, another filler. The goal is to break the chain at the beginning. When the pause appears, do nothing. That sounds simple, but for some learners it feels surprisingly difficult. You may feel that 1 second of silence lasts 5 seconds. You may think the other person is becoming impatient. You may imagine that they are judging your English, but most of the time, a short natural pause is much less noticeable than a long series of fillers. Compare these two answers. I think, the biggest problem is, people don't practice enough. Now listen to this. I think the biggest problem is, pause. People don't practice enough. The second speaker still hesitated. But the hesitation sounded intentional. That is the difference between losing control and using time. You should also learn that you do not need to answer every question immediately. Someone asks, "What would you change about your job if you could?" You do not need to attack the answer in the first half second. You can take a moment, you can breathe, you can even use a real thinking phrase when you genuinely need more time. "Let me think for a second. That's a good question. I haven't thought about that before." "Give me a moment." These phrases are different from nervous fillers because they communicate something real. Only keeps sound alive. "Let me think for a second" tells the listener exactly what is happening. But there is an important warning. Do not replace every with a long thinking phrase. If every answer begins with, "That's a good question," then that becomes another filler. The goal is still control. Sometimes use a phrase. Sometimes use a silent pause. Sometimes answer immediately. You are building choice. Here is a powerful exercise for learning that choice. Take 5 simple questions. What did you do today? What food do you enjoy? What are you learning right now? What is one goal you have? What makes a good friend? For every question, force yourself to wait 2 seconds before answering. Not because you need 2 seconds every time. You are doing it to teach your brain that silence is safe. Someone asks, "What food do you enjoy?" Do not say, I like. Wait, then answer, "I really enjoy spicy food." Pause again if you need another idea. Especially dishes with rice and chicken. The exercise may feel unnatural at first because your old habit wants to jump into the gap. That discomfort is useful. You are training a new response. Before, silence triggered sound. Now silence will begin to trigger thought. That is a completely different speaking system. Another reason learners fill silence is that they think the listener expects constant speech. But communication does not work like that. The listener does not need noise. The listener needs meaning. If you speak for 30 seconds without a clean pause, your answer can become harder to follow. If you divide the same answer into clear thought groups, the listener can stay with you. For example, "I think social media can be useful because it helps people stay connected." Pause. But it can also become a problem when people spend too much time on it. Pause. So I think the important thing is how we use it. That answer sounds organized because the pauses show where one idea ends and another begins. A pause is doing part of the communication. It is like punctuation in spoken English. When you write, you use commas and full stops. You do not write one endless line of words with no separation. Speaking needs separation too. Your pause is sometimes the spoken version of a full stop. This is why trying to remove every silence can actually make you sound less natural. Your speech needs breathing space. Your listener needs breathing space. Your thoughts need breathing space. Now notice another habit. Sometimes you know you want to pause, but you do not fully stop your voice. You stretch the final word instead. "I think, because, and so." This is another way of filling silence. The sound is different, but the habit is the same. Your brain is saying, "Do not stop completely." So you stretch a word while waiting for the next idea. When you notice this, finish the word normally, then stop. "I think," pause. There are 2 reasons. Do not drag the sentence across the gap. Let the gap exist. Another useful skill is learning where to pause. Do not pause randomly in the middle of an important phrase. For example, "I want to improve," pause, "my English." That can sound broken because "improve my English" belongs together. A better pause would be, "I want to improve my English," pause, especially my speaking. Pause between ideas, not inside every phrase. Think in small meaning groups. "I started learning English last year." Pause. "At first I focused mostly on grammar." Pause. "Now I'm trying to speak more." Each group carries one complete piece of meaning. This makes your English easier to produce and easier to understand. You can practice this with a simple 3-thought exercise. Choose one topic, such as "my hometown." Speak only 3 thoughts. For example, "I live in a fairly small city." Pause. "It's usually quiet, but the center gets busy in the evening." Pause. "My favorite thing about it is that my family lives nearby." Then stop. Do not try to continue forever. Do not fill the final silence. This exercise teaches you that an answer can have a clean beginning, middle, and end. You do not need to keep producing sound just because another thought might be possible. That matters because fillers often appear at the end of ideas. The speaker has already said enough but keeps going. And, so you can simply finish. Silence after a complete answer is not awkward. It tells the other person, I have finished. Now you can speak. That is part of conversation too. Speaking with control is not only knowing when to talk, it is also knowing when to stop. So during your next English practice, notice 3 moments. The silence before you begin, the silence between ideas, the silence after you finish. Those 3 spaces are where the filler habit often hides. Train them separately. Before speaking, allow yourself a moment to prepare. Between ideas, pause instead of making noise. After finishing, stop instead of adding unnecessary words. If you practice these 3 spaces, your speech can change even before you learn any new vocabulary. You may still say sometimes. That is fine. The goal of this chapter is not perfection. The goal is to change your automatic reaction. Right now, your brain may believe silence equals danger. You are going to teach it something new. Silence equals thinking space. And once that begins to feel natural, your fillers will lose one of their strongest sources. Because you will no longer need noise just to prove that you are still in control of the conversation. You will be able to stop, think, then continue. And in the next chapter, we will take that skill one step further. You will learn a practical method for replacing nervous fillers with controlled thinking pauses that still keep your conversation smooth and natural. Chapter 3. Replace nervous fillers with controlled thinking pauses. Now you understand something important. The goal is not to remove every sound from your speech. The goal is to stop using sound automatically every time your brain needs a moment. That is a very different goal. Because if you only tell yourself, do not say you create a problem. Your brain still needs thinking time. Your next idea still needs to be prepared. A word may still disappear. A sentence may still need to be organized. So if you remove the filler but give yourself nothing to replace it with, the old habit usually returns. That is why this chapter introduces the central skill of the English filler trap, the controlled thinking pause. A controlled thinking pause is a short, intentional moment of silence that gives your brain time to prepare the next meaningful piece of speech. It is not an embarrassed stop. It is not a frozen moment. It is not your mind going blank. It is a speaking tool. And once you learn to use it correctly, you begin to discover something surprising. You do not need to think faster. You need to give your thinking a better place to happen. Consider this question. What do you think makes someone a good leader? A learner who fears silence may begin immediately. I think, a good leader is someone who, understands people and, their answer may contain good ideas, but the ideas are arriving while the mouth is already under pressure. Now imagine a different response. I think a good leader needs 2 things. Pause. First, they need to understand people. Pause. And second, they need to make clear decisions. The second speaker did not necessarily think faster. They simply gave each thought enough space to arrive. That is what controlled pausing does. It separates thinking time from speaking time. Instead of forcing your brain and mouth to compete, you allow them to cooperate. Your brain prepares a small piece. Your mouth says it. Your brain prepares the next piece. Your mouth continues. This rhythm is much easier to control than trying to create an entire answer while speaking continuously. A useful way to understand this is to imagine your speech in thought units. A thought unit is one small piece of meaning. For example, I moved here 3 years ago. That is one thought. At first I found the city difficult. That is another. But now I really enjoy living here. That is another. You do not need to prepare all 3 thoughts before speaking. You only need the next one. This is where learners often make their biggest mistake. They believe they must know the whole answer before they can sound confident. So when someone asks a question, they search their mind for everything at once. The introduction, the vocabulary, the grammar, the examples, the ending. That is too much mental work. Then the mouth begins filling the delay. A stronger approach is much simpler. Prepare only your first thought. Say it. Pause. Then prepare the second. For example, someone asks, do you think social media is good or bad? Do not try to build a complete speech immediately. Choose your first direction. I think it can be useful. That is enough to begin. Now pause. It helps people stay connected. Pause. But I think it becomes unhealthy when we use it too much. Your answer develops one step at a time. This method is powerful because it removes the pressure to know everything in advance. You are no longer carrying the whole answer inside your head. You are carrying only the next piece. and that makes fillers less necessary. There are 3 main kinds of controlled thinking pauses you should learn. The first is the starting pause. This happens before you answer. Someone asks you a question. Instead of speaking immediately, you give yourself 1 or 2 seconds to choose your first idea. For example, what is something you want to achieve this year? Old reaction. I think, maybe. Controlled response. Pause. I want to become more confident when I speak English. That small pause protects the beginning of your answer, and the beginning matters. If you start without direction, the rest of the answer often becomes messy. But when the first thought is clear, your speech usually becomes calmer. This is especially useful for questions that require opinions. What do you think about online education? What would you change about your city? Why do you think people procrastinate? What is the biggest challenge in learning a language? These questions are not difficult because of vocabulary alone. They are difficult because they require you to choose a direction. So give yourself permission to choose before speaking. A short pause before an answer can sound far more confident than rushing into, well, I guess. The second type is the between thought pause. This is probably the most important one. You finish one idea, then you stop before the next idea begins. For example, I started learning English because I needed it for work. Pause. Later, I realized I also wanted to speak confidently when I travel. Pause. Now I practice speaking almost every day. The pause gives your brain time to change direction. Without that pause, learners often stretch the connection. I started learning English because I needed it for work, and, then, I also... You can hear the brain searching inside the sentence. Instead, finish the thought completely, then allow the next thought to arrive. A clean ending gives your brain a fresh starting point. This is much easier than trying to repair a sentence that has already become too long. The third type is the recovery pause. This is what you use when something goes wrong. Maybe you forget a word. Maybe you lose your sentence. Maybe your grammar feels wrong. Maybe you suddenly realize you do not know how to continue. The old habit is to panic. Sorry, Then the learner tries to repair everything while still making sound. A recovery pause works differently. Stop. Breathe once. Return to the meaning. Then restart simply. Suppose you say, I went there because I wanted to, You cannot remember the word explore. Instead of staying trapped, stop. Then say, I wanted to see more of the city, meaning restored. Conversation continues. Or suppose you begin. The reason people are, stop. Then restart. I think people struggle because they do not practice enough. You do not have to save the original sentence. This is important. Sometimes the best way to recover is not to repair the broken sentence. It is to abandon it and build a simpler one. That gives you freedom. You stop treating every mistake like an emergency. A mistake happens. You pause. You reset. You continue. This is how controlled speakers recover. Now let us talk about what makes a pause sound natural. A natural pause has 3 qualities. It is short enough to keep connection, long enough to allow thought, and placed where meaning can breathe. The pause does not need to be dramatic. Often 1 second is enough. Sometimes half a second is enough. Sometimes you need 2 or 3 seconds for a harder question. The exact length is less important than the feeling of control. If you are silent but your face shows panic, the pause may still feel uncomfortable to you. If you pause while staying calm, the moment feels different. So your body matters too. When you pause, do not freeze your whole face. Do not suddenly look terrified. Keep your expression relaxed. Breathe normally. Look at the listener naturally. Then continue. A pause becomes powerful when your body says, I am thinking, not, I have lost everything. This matters especially in real conversations, interviews, meetings, and presentations. The listener often reacts more to your confidence than to the exact number of seconds you pause. A calm 2-second pause can feel completely normal. A nervous half-second filled with repeated can feel much longer. The sound makes the struggle more visible. Silence often hides the struggle better than the filler does. There is another technique that makes controlled pauses much easier. It is called landing the sentence. A lot of fillers appear because learners do not finish their sentences strongly. Their voice continues upward or stays unfinished. I think the main problem is, then they feel forced to continue immediately, or, the reason I like it is because. Now the structure itself demands another phrase. If the next thought is not ready, the filler arrives. Instead, practice finishing complete thoughts. I think the main problem is lack of practice. Stop. The second problem is fear of mistakes. Stop. Each sentence lands. Once a sentence lands, you are free. You are no longer trapped inside an unfinished structure. This is extremely useful when you speak for longer. If you learn to land one sentence before beginning another, your speech becomes easier to control. You can test this with a simple topic. Describe your hometown. A filler-heavy answer might sound like, my hometown is, quite small and, there are a lot of people who, know each other and, now try landing each thought. My hometown is quite small. Pause. Most people know each other. Pause. The city is quiet during the day, but it becomes busy in the evening. Each sentence reaches a natural end. You are not forcing the listener to follow an unfinished chain. You are also giving yourself repeated chances to think. That is the hidden strength of sentence landing. Every full stop becomes a thinking opportunity, and every thinking opportunity reduces your need for filler. Another technique is planned breathing. Some learners say fillers because they do not breathe well while speaking. They start a long sentence, use most of their breath, and then their speech becomes weak. They begin saying, partly because they need air, and partly because the sentence has lost direction. So learn to breathe at the end of a thought, not dramatically, just naturally. Say, I started learning English 3 years ago. Breathe. At first I focused mostly on reading. Breathe. Now I want to improve my speaking. Your breathing and your thinking begin to work together. A breath gives your brain a tiny reset. It also slows the rush that creates fillers. This is especially helpful if you speak too quickly when nervous. Fast speech can create more fillers because your mouth reaches the end of the prepared thought before your brain has built the next one. Think about that carefully. If your mouth is moving at 100 kilometers per hour but your ideas are arriving at 60, eventually your mouth reaches empty road. Then, sometimes the solution is not better vocabulary. It is simply reducing your speaking speed enough for your thoughts to stay close behind. Not painfully slow, just controlled. You should be able to feel that your next thought is arriving before your current thought ends. That is a much healthier speaking rhythm. Here is an exercise called Pause Before Pressure. Choose a topic you can speak about easily. For example, my morning routine. Speak for 1 minute, but every time you feel coming, stop before it comes out. Do not continue immediately. Pause, breathe, choose the next thought, then speak again. Your first attempt may sound strange. You may pause 5 or 10 times. That is completely fine. You are not trying to sound perfect. You are learning to recognize the exact moment before the filler appears. This moment is extremely important because habits become easier to change when you can feel them beginning. At first, may feel automatic. It appears before you even notice, but with practice, you begin to feel the signal. The sentence is ending. Your next thought is unclear. Your mouth wants to make sound. That is your training moment. Stop there. That is where the new habit begins. After several days, the pause will start arriving earlier. You will not need to fight the filler after it comes out. Your brain will begin choosing silence first. This is what automatic improvement looks like. Not, I never say again, but, I notice the moment earlier and I choose better. Another useful exercise is 3-second preparation. Ask yourself a random question. What makes a good friend? Before you answer, give yourself 3 seconds to prepare only 3 words or ideas. Maybe, trust, honesty, support. Now speak. I think a good friend needs to be trustworthy. Pause. They should also be honest with you. Pause. And they should support you when life becomes difficult. You did not write a speech. You simply gave your brain 3 direction points. This is especially effective for longer answers because fillers often appear when the learner has no map. You do not need a full script. You only need a few signposts. For example, if someone asks, what are the advantages of living in a big city? Think, jobs, transport, activities. Then speak around those 3 ideas. A small mental map reduces searching, and less searching usually means fewer fillers. The same method works when telling stories. Stories often create fillers because the learner is trying to remember what happened while also choosing the language. Instead of telling the whole story at once, Think in stages. Beginning, problem, result. For example, last week I missed an important bus. I arrived at the station only 2 minutes late, but the bus had already left. Pause. So I had to wait almost an hour for the next one. 3 stages. Clear movement, minimal filler. This is one reason strong speakers often sound organized even when they are speaking spontaneously. They are not necessarily preparing every sentence. They are thinking in structures. A structure gives your brain somewhere to go. When the brain has direction, it does not need to search wildly for the next idea. Now let us deal with filler words such as actually, basically, literally, like, and you know. These words are different from because they can have real meaning. For example, actually, I changed my mind. Here, actually has a purpose. Basically, the system works in 3 steps. Here, basically, introduces a simplified explanation. You know what I mean? That can genuinely check whether the listener understands. The problem begins when these words appear without purpose. Actually, I think, actually, maybe we should, I went there and, it was really busy, basically, I just wanted to say, these are not vocabulary problems, they are thinking habits. The speaker has discovered a word that can hold the floor, so the brain keeps using it whenever it needs time. To fix this, ask one simple question. Does this word add meaning, or is it only buying time? If it adds meaning, keep it. If it is only buying time, pause instead. This protects your natural speaking style. You do not need to remove every well, actually, or I mean. You only need to stop using them unconsciously. You want your words to work for you, not hide your hesitation. There is also a useful difference between empty fillers and thinking phrases. Empty filler, repeated, thinking phrase. Let me think about that. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is, there are probably 2 reasons. I need a second to think. Thinking phrases can help because they communicate meaning while giving you time, but use them carefully. If you say, that's a good question before every answer, it becomes another trap. The goal is not to replace one automatic filler with another automatic phrase. The goal is flexibility. Sometimes silent pause, sometimes a short thinking phrase, sometimes immediate response. The stronger your speaking becomes, the more choices you have. And choice is the opposite of the filler trap. Another practical method is to use sentence starters that already have direction. Suppose someone asks, do you think people should work from home? Instead of beginning, I think, you can use a starter that creates structure. I think it depends on the type of work. Now you have direction. Or, there are 2 sides to it. Now your brain knows you can explain 2 sides. Or, for me, the biggest advantage is flexibility. Now your next idea is already defined. Useful sentence starters reduce filler because they help your brain enter the answer through a familiar doorway. Here are a few natural examples. I think the main reason is, one thing I've noticed is, for me the biggest problem is, there are 2 reasons for that. The first thing that comes to mind is, I would probably say, what matters most is, the purpose is not to memorize hundreds of expressions. Choose a few that fit the way you naturally speak. Practice them until they come easily. Then they can help your answer begin smoothly while your brain prepares the details. But remember, the starter should lead somewhere. Do not say, the main reason is, If you do not yet know the reason, pause before you use the starter. Prepare the direction first, then speak. That tiny change prevents the sentence from collapsing after the opening. Now try this exercise. Choose the question. Why do people find it difficult to speak English? Take 2 seconds. Choose one direction. Fear of mistakes. Now answer. I think fear of mistakes is one of the biggest reasons. Pause. People often know enough English, but they become too worried about saying something incorrectly. Pause. That pressure makes their speech slower. Notice how each pause helped the next thought become clear. Now try the same answer without pauses. You will probably feel the temptation to add filler. That comparison teaches you something important. Pauses are not slowing your English down. They are preventing your English from becoming disorganized. There is a difference between slow speech and controlled speech. Slow speech may feel heavy because every word takes too long. Controlled speech can still move naturally, but it includes clean places to think. Your goal is not to speak like this. I think learning English. That is too broken. Your goal is, I think learning English becomes easier when you practice regularly. Pause. But the practice has to be active. The sentence moves naturally. The pause comes at the thought boundary. This is exactly what you want. You should also practice silent counting. This is useful if 1 second of silence feels unbearable. Ask yourself a question. Before answering, silently count. 1. Then speak. Later, try 2 seconds. 1, 2, speak. This teaches your nervous system that silence does not create disaster. No one runs away. The conversation does not collapse. The listener does not suddenly decide you cannot speak English. You simply think and continue. Over time, you will not need to count. The calmness becomes more natural. One more thing matters here. Do not turn pause training into another form of perfectionism. You might start thinking, I paused too long. That pause was in the wrong place. I still said twice. That kind of self-monitoring can create the same pressure you are trying to remove. Instead, judge your practice by one question. Did I create more clean thinking space than before? If yes, you are improving. Maybe yesterday you used 20 fillers, and today you used 15. Good. Maybe you still used fillers, but you caught 3 moments and paused instead. Good. Maybe you answered one difficult question without rushing. Good. Progress is not the complete disappearance of hesitation. Progress is growing control over hesitation. That is the deeper meaning of this chapter. A controlled speaker is not someone whose brain never searches. A controlled speaker knows what to do while the brain searches. They can pause. They can breathe. They can simplify. They can restart. They can use a thinking phrase. They can finish one thought and wait for the next. That is a much more realistic form of fluency, and it is much more powerful than trying to become a person who never needs time. So the next time your mouth wants to say do not fight the sound after it appears. Catch the moment before it. Let your sentence land. Close your mouth for a second. Breathe. Ask yourself, what is my next small idea? Not, what is my perfect next sentence? Just the next idea. Then say it. That one habit can completely change the rhythm of your English. Because fillers grow when your mouth is afraid of empty space. Controlled speech begins when your brain learns that the empty space can be useful. In the next chapter, we are going deeper. Because even when you become comfortable with silence, another problem remains. Sometimes your next thought still takes too long to build. You pause correctly, but your brain is still constructing English word by word. And if that process stays slow, fillers can return. So next, you will learn how to train your brain to prepare the next phrase faster, before your mouth feels the need to rush in. Chapter 4. Train your brain to build the next phrase before your mouth rushes in. By now, you have learned how to recognize the moment before a filler appears, how to stop treating silence like danger, and how to replace nervous sounds with controlled thinking pauses. But there is another reason, you know, and repeated words keep returning even after you become more comfortable with silence. Sometimes the pause itself is not the real problem. The deeper problem is that your brain is still trying to build English too slowly, one small piece at a time, while your mouth is already waiting to continue. If your next phrase takes too long to form, the pressure eventually comes back, and your old filler habit finds an opening again. This is where the problem becomes more interesting, because speaking with fewer fillers is not only about becoming comfortable with silence, it is also about changing how your brain prepares language. When you speak in your first language, you usually do not search for every word separately. You think of the message, familiar phrases appear quickly, and your mouth begins speaking before you consciously analyze the grammar. But in English, your brain may still be doing too much construction work. You have an idea, then you search for vocabulary, then you check the grammar, then you decide which tense you need, then you arrange the words, and only after all of that does the phrase become ready. That process can work when you are writing because writing gives you time, but conversation keeps moving. If every small phrase must be built from zero, you will keep needing places to hide the delay. Imagine someone asks you, "Why do you want to improve your English?" The idea inside your mind may already be clear. You want better opportunities, more confidence, and easier communication. But instead of letting those ideas come out in simple pieces, your brain starts building the sentence word by word. You think, I want, maybe I should say I would like. Improving my English because, for my career, in my career. While that construction is happening, your mouth has already opened, so you hear yourself saying, I want to, improve my English because, the filler is not creating the delay. The filler is covering the delay that your construction process created. A more trained speaking system works differently. The speaker does not prepare every word separately. They prepare small groups of meaning. Instead of building I plus want plus to plus improve plus my plus English plus because, the brain may retrieve the whole phrase I want to improve my English because as one familiar unit. Then the next unit may be it will help me at work. These groups are much easier to produce because the brain is not rebuilding the grammar each time. The phrase has already been practiced enough that it comes out almost as one movement. This is one of the hidden mechanics behind smoother speech. Fluent speakers often rely on familiar sentence frames and phrase patterns, rather than inventing every sentence from nothing. You can think of these phrase patterns as ready-made pathways. If you have to create a new path every time you speak, your brain works slowly, and you hesitate more. But if you have already walked the same path many times, movement becomes easier. When you hear a question about your opinion, phrases such as I think the main reason is wat hier memsham voor is noen thisham donwain, vreem deel David Urider for kubabel. When you need more time, it may know let me think about that, or simply use a clean pause. These patterns do not replace your ideas. They give your ideas a structure to enter. This matters because fillers often appear at the beginning of a thought. The brain knows the general idea but does not know how to enter the sentence. It is like standing outside a building with many doors and wasting time choosing which door to use. The longer you stand there, the more pressure you feel. A familiar sentence frame gives you a reliable entrance. Someone asks, what is the hardest part of learning English for you? Instead of searching for the perfect opening, you can begin. For me, the hardest part is speaking quickly. Now the sentence has direction. Your brain can focus on the real content instead of wasting energy inventing the structure. This does not mean you should memorize hundreds of fixed sentences and sound robotic. That would create a different problem. The goal is to train a small number of flexible patterns deeply enough that they become natural tools. A sentence frame should be like a reusable container. The main reason is can hold many ideas. The main reason is lack of practice. The main reason is fear of mistakes. The main reason is that people depend too much on translation. The frame stays familiar while the meaning changes. Because the structure is already ready, your brain can spend more attention on the idea itself. Now think about what happens during a longer answer. You say your first thought clearly, then you reach the end of that thought, and your brain has to decide what to do next. This is one of the most common places where fillers return. You may have finished the sentence, I think learning English takes time, but your mind has not prepared the next direction. So you say, and, while searching. The better approach is to train your brain to prepare a small next step before the current sentence completely finishes. You do not need to know the exact next sentence. You only need to know the direction of the next idea. For example, suppose your answer has 3 simple directions: reason, example, conclusion. You begin. I think people struggle with speaking because they are afraid of making mistakes. While you are saying that sentence, your brain already knows that the next direction is an example. So after a short pause, you say, for example, they may know the answer but stay silent because they are worried about grammar. While saying that, your brain knows the final direction is the conclusion. Then you continue. So the real problem is often fear, not lack of knowledge. The speech feels smoother because your brain is not searching in an empty space. It has a small map. This is what many fluent speakers are doing without thinking about it. They are not always preparing the exact words ahead of time, but they are often preparing the direction of the message. They know, now I will explain the reason, now I will give an example, now I will compare, now I will finish. That internal structure reduces filler because the brain is not constantly asking, what should I say next? It already knows what kind of thing comes next, even if the exact wording is still being created. You can train this skill with what I call next phrase preparation. The idea is simple. While you are speaking one short thought, do not force your brain to create the entire next sentence. Just prepare one useful phrase or one direction that will help you continue. Suppose you are talking about exercise. You say, I try to exercise 3 times a week. While you say that, your next direction might be, because it helps me feel better. Then you say, "It helps me feel more energetic." While saying that, your next direction might be, "But sometimes I get busy." Then you continue. The difficult part is staying consistent when work becomes busy. Your brain stays one small step ahead without carrying too much. The key is that the next step must stay small. If you try to prepare 3 complete sentences while speaking the first one, you create another kind of overload. You stop listening to yourself, your current sentence becomes weaker, and you may lose the natural rhythm. You only want enough preparation to avoid arriving at the end of a sentence with absolutely no direction. Think of it like walking with a flashlight. You do not need to see the whole road. You only need to see the next few steps. There is also a second mechanism that makes fillers worse: over-searching for vocabulary. When a learner knows many words, they sometimes create more hesitation because they search through too many possibilities. Suppose you want to say that a movie was interesting. Your brain could use interesting, engaging, fascinating, entertaining, captivating, or compelling. If you begin comparing all those options while speaking, your fluency slows down. The listener does not need the most impressive word. They need a clear word that arrives on time. This is an important principle. The best word in conversation is often not the most advanced word. It is the word you can access quickly and use naturally. You can hear the difference in 2 speakers. One says, "The movie was, captivating, maybe." The other says, "The movie was really interesting. I especially liked the ending." The second speaker may use simpler vocabulary, but the message feels stronger because the language is available and controlled. Fluency grows when your brain trusts simple words instead of constantly trying to prove how much vocabulary you know. A useful rule is this: if the exact word does not appear quickly, move to a simpler version. Do not hold the entire conversation hostage while your memory searches. If you cannot remember exhausted, say very tired. If you forget convenient, say easy for me. If disappointed disappears, say I was not happy with it. Later, the stronger word may come back, but the conversation has already survived. This habit trains flexibility, and flexibility is one of the strongest protections against fillers. Another hidden cause of filler speech is grammar checking. You may know the grammar rule, but during conversation you try to inspect the sentence while you are producing it. You say, "Yesterday I went to the store." One correction is not a disaster, but if your brain checks every verb, article, and preposition before allowing the sentence to continue, your speech becomes heavy. A speaker who is constantly editing while talking will almost always hesitate more than a speaker who focuses first on meaning and fixes only important mistakes. This does not mean grammar is unimportant. It means grammar should gradually move from conscious checking into repeated patterns. If you have practiced, "Yesterday I went," "Last week I visited," "When I was younger," and other past time frames many times, the structure becomes easier to retrieve. The same is true for opinions, explanations, comparisons, and stories. Grammar becomes faster when it lives inside familiar phrases, not only inside rules you remember from a lesson. For example, learning the rule for the present perfect can help you understand the tense, but in speaking, phrases such as "I've never tried that," "I've been there before," "I've already finished," or "I've been learning English for 2 years" become useful because they are complete patterns your brain can retrieve. The more often you hear and use them, the less time you need to build them. Less construction means fewer hesitation gaps, and fewer hesitation gaps mean fewer automatic fillers. This is why your training should not only include "stop saying you also need to strengthen the language that replaces the empty space. If your brain has no ready phrase, no simple structure, no next direction, and no flexible vocabulary, silence will always feel harder to control. The filler habit is partly a pause problem, but it is also a preparation problem. Let us look at one of the strongest ways to improve that preparation: phrase chaining. Phrase chaining means practicing how one useful phrase naturally leads into another. Instead of memorizing isolated expressions, you practice small speaking sequences. For example, "I think the main reason is," leads into, "for example," which can lead into, "that is why." Now your brain has a simple 3-step chain. If someone asks you a question, you can move through the chain without searching for a completely new structure at every stage. Take the question, "Why do some people stop learning English?" You could say, "I think the main reason is that progress feels slow." Pause. For example, someone may study for months and still struggle in conversations. Pause. That is why they sometimes lose motivation. This answer sounds organized because the language has direction. Your brain is not jumping randomly from one sentence to the next. You can build other chains for different speaking situations. For giving an opinion, you might use, I think. One reason is, for example, so, for comparing two ideas, on one hand, on the other hand, for me, for storytelling, at first, then, after that, in the end, for explaining a problem. The problem is, this happens because, a better approach is. These are simple structures, but they reduce the mental load of speaking because your brain knows what kind of step comes next. On himai tuhun. You do not need to use the same chain every time. In fact, you should gradually build several options so your English remains natural. But at the beginning, a little structure is better than constant searching. The learner who has no speaking framework often fills the gaps with, The learner who has a few reliable pathways can stay calmer because they know how to continue. Another powerful skill is delayed detail. Learners often create fillers because they try to give every detail too early. Someone asks, "How was your weekend?" And the learner begins trying to explain the place, the people, the time, the weather, the reason, and the sequence all inside the first sentence. The sentence becomes overloaded before it even starts. A stronger speaker gives the main answer first and adds detail later. For example, "It was really good. I went hiking with 2 friends. Pause. We left early in the morning because the weather was cooler. Pause. The best part was reaching the top just before sunset." The listener receives the information in layers. The speaker does not need to prepare everything at once. This is an important speaking habit because it gives your brain time. First give the simple version, then expand. You can use the same strategy with opinions. Someone asks, "Do you like living in a big city?" Start with the main position. "Yes, mostly." Pause, then explain. "I like having more opportunities and better transport." Pause, then add the other side. "The only thing I dislike is the noise." You do not need to deliver your entire thought in the first sentence. Let the answer grow gradually. This also helps with filler words, because one of the strongest triggers for is trying to produce a long sentence before you have enough language ready. Shorter thought units give you repeated safe places to think. Every completed sentence becomes a small platform where your brain can reset. There is another hidden skill behind controlled speech, prediction. When you practice familiar speaking situations often enough, your brain begins to predict what kinds of language you may need. If you are answering questions about your daily life, you may expect phrases about time, habits, preferences, and reasons. If you are telling a story, you may expect sequence words and past tense patterns. If you are giving an opinion, you may expect comparison, reasons, and examples. Prediction makes language retrieval faster because the brain is not searching the entire language at once. This is why random practice is sometimes less powerful than targeted practice. If you practice 20 completely unrelated questions, you get variety, but your brain may not build strong patterns. If you practice 5 opinion questions in one session, you begin noticing the same useful structures. I think, for me, the biggest reason. For example, it depends. These patterns become quicker because you use them repeatedly in a similar context. Later, when a real opinion question appears, your brain recognizes the situation and already knows which language family to search. The same principle works with storytelling. Practice several short stories using the same broad structure. Setting, problem, result. Last weekend gives you the setting. Then something unexpected happened, gives you the problem. In the end, gives you the result. You can change the content every time while keeping the structure familiar. The more familiar the structure becomes, the less your brain struggles to organize language in real time. Now think about speaking speed. Fillers often increase when your mouth moves faster than your planning system. You may believe that fast speaking sounds fluent, so you push the first sentence out quickly. But then the mouth reaches the end before the brain has prepared anything else. At that moment, the filler appears. The faster you rush, the more often this can happen. A better goal is not maximum speed. It is matched speed. Your speaking speed should be close enough to your thinking speed that your next phrase can arrive without panic. If your brain is still developing automatic English, a slightly slower rhythm may actually sound more fluent because the sentences stay complete and the pauses stay controlled. As your phrase retrieval becomes faster through practice, your natural speaking speed will increase by itself. You do not need to force it. Try saying this sentence as fast as possible. I think one of the biggest problems English learners have is that they are afraid of making mistakes. If you rush it, you may run out of breath or lose clarity. Now say it with natural rhythm. I think one of the biggest problems English learners have is that they are afraid of making mistakes. The small pause gives your brain and breath time while keeping the meaning connected. Smooth speech is not produced by speed alone. It is produced by coordination. Coordination is the real theme of this chapter. Your brain, mouth, attention, vocabulary, grammar, and breathing need to stop fighting one another. The old system looks like this. The mouth starts too early. The brain searches too hard. Grammar checking slows the sentence. Vocabulary disappears. Pressure increases, and the filler appears. The trained system is different. The brain chooses the first idea. The mouth says one thought unit. A short pause appears. The next direction is prepared. Simple language is accepted, and the message continues. One of the best exercises for building this coordination is one phrase ahead speaking. Choose an easy topic such as my job, my family, my morning, or why I am learning English. Speak slowly enough that while you are saying one thought, you can prepare only the opening of the next thought. For example, I usually wake up around 7. While saying that, prepare after that. Then continue, after that I make breakfast. While saying that, prepare before work. Then continue, before work I usually check my messages. You are training your brain to stay one small step ahead. Do not worry if this feels difficult at first. The goal is not to do it perfectly. The goal is to create awareness of the next phrase before the current sentence completely ends. Over time, this can become more automatic, especially with familiar language. Another exercise is simple first speaking. Ask yourself a question and force yourself to answer with the easiest natural sentence you can produce. Only after that sentence is complete can you add detail. For example, do you enjoy cooking? First, yes I do. Then, I usually cook in the evening. Then, I especially enjoy making simple rice dishes. This trains your brain to move from stable language into detail instead of beginning with complexity. A third exercise is rebuild without filler. Take a sentence that usually makes you hesitate and practice 3 simpler ways to say the same idea. Suppose you want to express, I was disappointed because the event was canceled at the last minute. Alternative 1. I was disappointed because they canceled the event very late. Alternative 2. The event was canceled just before it started, so I was disappointed. Alternative 3. I felt bad because the event was canceled at the last minute. Now your brain knows it has options. In a real conversation, if one version does not come quickly, another can. This is important because filler habits grow stronger when the brain believes there is only one correct sentence. A flexible speaker does not depend on one perfect path. They can change direction without stopping the conversation. If a word disappears, they describe it. If a sentence becomes too complicated, they restart simply. If the grammar feels uncertain, they choose a familiar pattern. Flexibility reduces panic, and reduced panic gives fillers less power. You should also practice clean restarting. Sometimes the best way to recover is to stop the sentence and begin again instead of trying to drag it forward with Suppose you say, I think the reason people, the reason why people. Instead of fighting the broken sentence, stop and restart. I think people struggle because they do not practice enough. That restart may feel like a mistake to you, but to the listener it often sounds much cleaner than a long repair filled with hesitation sounds. The same applies when you choose the wrong direction. You might begin, the biggest advantage is, then realize you actually want to discuss a disadvantage. You do not need to hide the change. You can say, actually, let me say that differently. The biggest problem is the cost. Here, actually, and let me say that differently have a real communication function. They are not empty fillers. They help you reset the message clearly. This is another important distinction. Controlled speech is not speech without corrections. It is speech where corrections are handled deliberately. A fluent speaker may change direction, correct a word, or restart a sentence. The difference is that they do not panic and cover the moment with 10 empty sounds. They repair the message and continue. Now let us talk about the pressure of speaking with another person, because practice alone is easier. When you speak by yourself, there is no listener waiting, so you can pause freely. In conversation, the other person's eyes can make the pause feel much longer. You may feel responsible for answering quickly. This social pressure can make your mouth rush even when you know how to pause. One way to handle this is to prepare first response frames for common conversation situations. If someone asks for your opinion, you might begin with, I think, or for me. If someone asks a difficult question, you can say, "Let me think about that for a second." If someone asks about your experience, you can begin, "In my experience." If you disagree, you can say, "I see your point, but..." These frames reduce the pressure of finding the first words while the listener is waiting. Again, do not turn them into automatic decoration. Use them because they help you enter the message. The most important thing is that the frame should lead to a clear idea. "I think" is useful only if you have prepared what you think. The frame buys a small amount of time, but it should not become another place where appears. A very effective practice is to record yourself answering the same question 3 times. The first time, speak naturally without changing anything. The second time, focus only on reducing filler and using pauses. The third time, focus on preparing your next phrase earlier and using simpler language. Then compare the 3 recordings. You may notice that the third answer is not necessarily faster, but it feels more controlled. The ideas arrive more cleanly because your brain is not improvising every structure from zero. This kind of comparison gives you useful evidence. You begin to hear that better fluency does not always mean more words per minute. Sometimes your strongest answer is the one with fewer unnecessary words, clearer thought units, and more deliberate pauses. Another practice is frame repetition with variation. Choose one frame, such as, "The main reason is." Use it with 10 different ideas. The main reason is lack of time. The main reason is fear. The main reason is cost. The main reason is that people do not practice enough. Then choose another frame. "One thing I've noticed is," and create 10 examples. The purpose is not memorization for its own sake. You are training the structure until your brain can retrieve it without effort. As retrieval becomes faster, you create more mental space for content. This is what automaticity really means in speaking. It does not mean your brain stops thinking. It means the easy parts require less conscious attention, so you can use your attention for the harder parts. If "I think the main reason is" arrives automatically, you can focus on the actual reason. If, for example, arrives automatically, you can focus on the example. If "in the end" arrives automatically, you can focus on how the story finishes. This is the same reason experienced drivers can talk while driving, but beginners often cannot. The beginner must consciously manage every movement. The experienced driver has automated many basic actions, so attention becomes available for other things. English speaking develops in a similar way. When basic sentence frames, common phrases, and familiar grammar patterns become automatic, you no longer need to spend all your attention assembling them. Your speaking becomes lighter. But automaticity does not come from reading a list once, it comes from repeated use. You need to hear the phrase, say it, use it with different meanings, and retrieve it again later. That repetition slowly changes the phrase from something you know into something your mouth can use quickly. There is a big difference between recognizing "the main reason is" when you read it and producing it naturally when someone asks you a question. The second skill needs active practice. This is why your filler problem may continue even if you know thousands of words. Knowledge and retrieval are different abilities. You may know a word when you see it but not retrieve it under pressure. You may understand a sentence frame but not use it quickly. You may know a grammar rule but still need too much time to apply it. The solution is not always more knowledge. Sometimes you need stronger access to the knowledge you already have. So when you train, ask yourself a different question. Do not only ask, "Do I know this phrase?" Ask, "Can I use this phrase without searching?" Do not only ask, "Do I understand this grammar?" Ask, "Can I produce it naturally?" and a real answer. That shift moves your practice from passive knowledge towards speaking control. At this point, you may notice that reducing fillers is becoming a much deeper project than simply removing the word That is exactly the point. If you attack only the sound, the habit comes back. But if you improve phrase retrieval, sentence structure, flexibility, pacing, and next thought preparation, the filler begins losing its job. Your mouth no longer needs to make noise because your brain is becoming better at preparing language. There is one final skill in this chapter that connects everything together. Finish, prepare, continue. Finish the thought you are currently speaking. Prepare only the next small direction. Continue when it is ready. Do not overlap all 3 jobs. Do not begin the next sentence before the current one has landed. Do not prepare an entire paragraph while trying to speak one sentence. Keep the cycle simple. I want to improve my English because it will help me professionally. Finish, pause and prepare. Confidence. I also want to feel more confident when I travel. Finish, pause and prepare. Practice. That is why I try to practice speaking every day. This rhythm gives your English control. Your speech may still contain pauses, but those pauses are productive. They are helping the next phrase become clearer instead of becoming empty spaces filled with nervous sound. And that is the hidden difference between a speaker who constantly says and a speaker who sounds composed. The second speaker does not always think faster. They have simply trained the process more efficiently. They use familiar phrases, smaller thought units, flexible vocabulary, clear structures, and enough space for the next idea to arrive. Your goal is not to become a machine that never hesitates. Your goal is to become a speaker whose brain and mouth are better coordinated. When your language system becomes more organized, you do not have to fight fillers so aggressively. They begin disappearing because the moments that created them become easier to manage. So when you practice this week, focus on 4 things. Prepare the first idea before you begin, speak in small thought units, keep your next direction one step ahead, and accept simpler language when it keeps the message moving. These habits will do far more for your fluency than trying to punish every after it appears. In the next chapter, we move from understanding into automatic training, because knowing how controlled speech works is not enough. You may understand every idea in this chapter and still return to when pressure appears. The old habit has been repeated hundreds or thousands of times, so the new response must also be repeated until it becomes easier than the old one. That is where speaking drills become powerful, and that is where clean pauses can begin turning from a technique you remember into a habit your mouth uses automatically. Chapter 5. Make clean pauses automatic through speaking drills. At this point, you may understand exactly why fillers appear. You know that and repeated words often show up when your brain needs time, when your sentence is too complicated, when your next idea is not ready, or when you are afraid to let silence exist. You also know how to use a controlled pause, how to prepare the next small thought, how to simplify your language, and how to build answers through familiar phrase patterns. But understanding all of this creates only one kind of progress: conscious progress. You know what you should do. The real challenge begins when you have to do it automatically while speaking to another person. This is where learners often become disappointed. They practice alone and think, I understand the method now, I will stop saying Then someone unexpectedly asks them a question, their attention moves to the meaning of the conversation, and within a few seconds the old habit returns. I think, The learner becomes frustrated because they believe the method did not work, but nothing has gone wrong. The new behavior simply has not been repeated enough to compete with the old one. Habits become powerful because they save effort. If you have used a filler thousands of times while thinking, your brain has learned a very fast connection. Thought becomes difficult, mouth produces sound. You do not need to decide to say The response appears automatically. That automatic response cannot usually be removed by one strong decision. It needs to be replaced by another response that has also been practiced many times. Instead of difficulty leading directly to filler, you want difficulty to begin leading towards something else. Finish the thought, close the mouth, breathe, prepare the next idea, then continue. That new sequence must become familiar enough that you can use it even when your attention is busy with the actual conversation. This is the purpose of the training in this chapter. You are not learning another theory. You are teaching your speaking system what to do when the old filler moment appears. The first thing to understand is that filler training should not begin with difficult speaking. If you immediately choose a complicated topic such as politics, economics, technology, or a subject you know very little about, your brain will be working too hard on ideas and vocabulary. Then you will not have enough attention left to practice the pause itself. It is similar to learning a new movement in sports. You begin slowly and under control before trying to perform it under pressure. Start with topics where the ideas are already easy for you. Your morning routine, your favorite food, your family, your hometown, your work, your studies, a movie you watched, a place you visited, or something you did yesterday are good starting points. The topic should be familiar enough that you do not need to spend much energy deciding what to say. This allows you to focus on how you are saying it. Suppose your topic is your morning routine. Without training, you might say, I usually wake up at 7 and then I check my phone, and after that, I make breakfast and… Your ideas are simple, but the filler habit still appears because your mouth is trying to move continuously. Now use a drill. Speak only one complete thought at a time. I usually wake up around 7. Stop. Let the sentence finish completely. Take one natural breath. Prepare the next idea. After that, I check my phone for a few minutes. Stop again. prepare the next idea. Then I make breakfast before I start working. This may feel unusually controlled at first. You may think, I sound too slow. But that is not a problem during training. You are exaggerating the new pattern so your brain can notice it clearly. When someone learns to drive, they consciously check mirrors, control the pedals, and think about every movement. Later, those movements become automatic. Speaking drills work the same way. At first, you may consciously tell yourself, finish, pause, prepare, continue. After enough practice, you no longer need the words. Your brain begins recognizing the moment on its own. One of the strongest drills is the clean stop drill. Choose one easy topic and speak for 1 minute. Every sentence must finish cleanly. You are not allowed to drag the end with and, so, or an unfinished sound. If you do not know what comes next, you stop completely. Imagine you are talking about your city. You say, my city has changed a lot in the last few years. Stop. You do not know exactly what to say next, so you wait. Then the next idea arrives. There are many more restaurants and shops now. Stop. Another idea. Traffic has also become much worse. Stop. The silence between those ideas may feel uncomfortable during the first few sessions. That discomfort is useful because it reveals how strongly your brain expects continuous sound. Do not remove the discomfort by immediately filling it. Stay inside the silence long enough for your brain to learn that nothing bad happens there. The conversation in your practice does not collapse. Your English does not disappear. You simply continue when the next thought is ready. A second drill is the filler replacement drill. Record yourself speaking naturally for 1 or 2 minutes. Do not try to sound better. Speak exactly as you normally do. Then listen back and notice only the places where fillers appear. Do not judge your pronunciation, grammar, accent, or vocabulary during this exercise. You are looking for one thing: what happened immediately before each filler. Maybe you hear, I like my job because, I work with good people. Stop the recording at that point. Ask yourself what the brain needed. Perhaps it needed the reason. Replay the sentence and replace the filler with silence. I like my job because, pause. I work with good people. Then try an even cleaner version. I like my job, pause. One reason is that I work with good people. You are teaching yourself that there is usually more than one way through the difficult moment. The old way was filler. The new way may be pause, sentence ending, simplification, or restart. If you hear, last year I went to, I cannot remember the name, the problem is different. You were searching for information rather than building grammar. Your replacement might be, last year I visited a small town near the coast. If the exact name does not matter, move around it. If it matters, pause and retrieve it. This is why recording is so valuable. During live speaking, fillers can pass too quickly for you to understand why they happened. A recording slows the experience down. It turns a vague feeling of, I used too many fillers, into specific information. You begin seeing patterns. Perhaps most of your fillers appear before examples. Perhaps they appear when you begin a new sentence. Perhaps they appear when you search for adjectives. Perhaps they appear because you keep building long sentences with and. Different causes require different training. Another useful drill is one breath, one thought. This does not mean every sentence must be extremely short. It means you practice delivering one clear thought within one comfortable breath and then resetting. For example, I started learning English because I wanted better job opportunities. Breathe. At first I studied mostly grammar and vocabulary. Breathe. Later, I realized that I needed much more speaking practice. Learners who use many fillers often have weak breath boundaries. They keep speaking until the sentence, the thought, and the breath all become unstable at the same time. Then appears almost like a rescue. When you learn to breathe at natural meaning boundaries, your speaking rhythm becomes calmer. The breath itself creates a clean pause without you having to invent one. You can practice this by reading a short paragraph aloud first. Mark places where one idea naturally ends. Read the first thought, stop, breathe, then continue. After that, put the text away and speak about the same topic in your own words using similar thought boundaries. Reading is not the final skill, but it can help your body feel the rhythm before you create the language yourself. Now let us make the practice more difficult. Once you can speak about familiar topics with clean pauses, begin using random question drills. Write 10 simple questions on small pieces of paper or keep them in your phone. Questions might include, What is one habit you want to change? What makes a good friend? Would you rather live in a city or a small town? What is something you learned recently? What do you enjoy doing when you have free time? Choose one question without preparing. Before answering, give yourself 2 seconds. Then speak for 30 to 60 seconds. Your goal is not to give a brilliant answer. Your goal is to maintain control while thinking. If your answer starts becoming messy, do not force it forward. Finish the current thought. Pause. Choose a new direction. Continue. For example, the question is, would you rather live in a city or a small town? You might say, I would probably choose a small town. Pause. I like quieter places and I do not enjoy heavy traffic. Pause. However, I would still want to live close enough to a city because cities offer more opportunities. That is enough. You did not need a complex speech. You practiced responding to an unexpected question without treating the thinking moments like emergencies. At first, give yourself permission to pause longer than you would in real conversation. You are building the behavior. Later, you will make the pauses more natural and shorter. If you demand perfect conversational timing too early, you may return to fillers simply because you are trying to perform before the new habit is stable. This leads to an important principle. First train control, then train speed. Many learners reverse this. They try to speak quickly and hope control will somehow appear later. Usually the opposite happens. Speed magnifies weak habits. If your brain already uses fillers when it needs time, faster speaking gives it even less time and produces even more filler. Slow your practice enough that you can feel the exact moment when the next phrase is being prepared. After that feeling becomes familiar, slowly increase the speed. You might answer the same question 3 times. First, speak slowly with very clear pauses. Second, speak at a normal, relaxed speed. Third, speak slightly faster while preserving the same clean thought boundaries. If the fillers return strongly in the third version, you have found your current limit. Reduce the speed again and continue training. A powerful learner does not treat that limit as failure. It is simply information. Your speaking system is telling you, at this speed my planning cannot stay ahead. Good training respects that signal. Another drill is the 3-part answer. This is especially useful because fillers often appear in longer responses. Give every answer 3 sections: main point, reason, example. You can use this structure with almost any opinion question. Suppose someone asks, do you think people spend too much time on their phones? Your main point is, yes, I think many people do. Pause. Your reason is, phones make it very easy to keep checking something every few minutes. Pause. Your example is, for example, people sometimes open social media without even deciding to do it. The structure reduces mental searching because you already know what kind of information should come next. You are not trying to invent the whole answer while speaking. You know the path: point, reason, example. Later you can add a conclusion. So I think the real problem is not the phone itself but the habit of checking it constantly. Now you have a 4-part answer. The language remains spontaneous, but the thought organization is predictable. This type of practice is especially powerful for English learners because fillers are often caused by idea organization rather than language weakness alone. You may know enough vocabulary, but if you do not know whether your next sentence should explain, compare, give an example, or finish the point, your brain searches too widely. Structure narrows the search. You should also practice controlled story drills, because storytelling creates different filler pressure from opinion speaking. When telling a story, your brain is managing time, sequence, memory, vocabulary, and emotion. It is easy to become lost in the middle and start filling. Use a 4-part story frame: where you were, what happened, what changed, how it ended. For example, last month I went to a restaurant with a friend. Pause. While we were eating, the electricity suddenly went out. Pause. At first everyone became quiet, but then the staff brought candles to the tables. Pause. In the end, the evening became more memorable because the restaurant looked completely different. The purpose is not to make every story sound formulaic. The structure is training support. Once sequence becomes easier, you can speak more freely. If you get stuck in a story, use a recovery pause instead of repeating and then, stop. Ask yourself silently, what happened next? Then continue. This practice teaches your brain that a moment of memory search does not require sound. There is also a drill specifically for vocabulary gaps, the Describe It drill. Choose 10 common objects, actions, or ideas. Pretend you have forgotten the English word and explain each one without using the word itself. For umbrella, you might say, it is something you carry when it rains to keep yourself dry. For receipt, you might say, It is the small paper a shop gives you after you pay. For appointment, you might say, it is a planned time when you meet a doctor or another professional. This exercise teaches your brain not to freeze when vocabulary disappears. Instead of filler becoming the automatic response to a missing word, explanation becomes available. You are building a second root. You can do the same with verbs. If you forget borrow, say, take something from someone and give it back later. If you forget recommend, say, tell someone that something is good and they should try it. You may not speak this way forever, but knowing that you can escape a vocabulary gap changes your confidence. Your brain becomes less afraid of forgetting, because forgetting no longer means the entire sentence must stop. Another powerful drill is the restart drill. Learners often use fillers because they believe a sentence must be rescued after it becomes broken. Practice giving yourself permission to restart cleanly. Begin deliberately with a difficult sentence. One of the reasons because people are, then stop. Say, let me say that more simply. People often struggle because they do not practice speaking enough. You are training yourself to abandon a weak structure without embarrassment. Try 10 different restarts. Use phrases such as, let me say that differently, what I mean is, or simply stop and begin again without announcing it. The goal is to discover that restarting does not damage communication. Sometimes it improves it. This is especially useful because filler-heavy speakers often become trapped by their own unfinished grammar. They begin, the thing that I want to, and suddenly do not know how to complete the structure, so they keep it alive with, A trained speaker can stop and choose a simpler route. What I want is more time to practice. You can also train end-of-answer control. This is often ignored, but many unnecessary fillers appear after the speaker has already finished the real answer. They say, so that is probably the biggest reason, yeah, you know, so, because silence after finishing feels uncomfortable. Practice ending completely. Ask yourself a question, answer it, then close your mouth. Do not add so, yeah, or you know, after the meaning is complete. What is your favorite season? My favorite season is winter because I enjoy colder weather and I sleep much better when the nights are cool. Stop. The silence after the answer belongs to the listener now. You do not need to keep holding the conversation with sound. This is a subtle but important skill because good conversation is not only about producing speech, it is about exchanging turns. If you fill every ending, the other person may not know when you have finished. A clean ending makes your speech easier to follow and makes turn-taking more natural. Once these drills become comfortable, begin pressure training. Pressure training does not mean creating panic. It means making the exercise slightly more similar to real conversation. You can set a timer and give yourself 5 seconds to begin answering a question. You can ask a friend to choose questions for you. You can use random prompts that you have not seen before. You can record yourself standing rather than sitting. You can practice while making eye contact with yourself in a mirror. Each small change adds a little pressure. So the goal is to see whether your clean pause habit survives when your attention is divided. Suppose you practice alone and can answer, what makes a good leader, very calmly. Then a friend asks you unexpectedly. Your old filler habit may return because now there is a real listener. That does not mean you have gone backward. It means you have moved into the next level of training. When this happens, reduce the challenge slightly rather than giving up. Ask the friend to give you a few seconds after each question. Practice shorter answers. Focus on only one behavior, such as pausing before you begin. Once that becomes stable, add between thought pauses. Training works best when the challenge is difficult enough to create growth, but not so difficult that every new habit disappears. There is another important skill, tolerating imperfect pauses. Some learners replace filler anxiety with pause anxiety. They become obsessed with making every pause exactly 1 second long and perfectly placed. That creates new tension. Woman. A natural conversation will not always be clean. Sometimes you will pause too long. Sometimes you will begin a sentence and restart. Sometimes will appear. Sometimes you will repeat a word. That is normal. The purpose of training is not to turn human speech into polished studio narration. Your goal is to reduce automatic filler enough that your message feels clearer and you feel more in control. If one appears during a 2-minute answer but the rest of your speech is organized and calm, do not treat the answer as a failure. This matters because perfectionism can actually strengthen filler habits. If you become afraid of saying then the moment you feel one coming, you panic. Panic makes thought retrieval harder, and harder retrieval makes the filler more likely. You create the very problem you are trying to avoid. Train with a calmer rule. Notice, replace when possible, continue. If the filler already came out, continue. Do not stop the conversation to punish yourself mentally. The useful moment is the next one. Another excellent training method is filler counting, but it must be used carefully. Record yourself speaking for 2 minutes and count the number of fillers. Perhaps you use 18. 1 week later, record yourself on a similar topic and count again. Maybe you use 11. That shows progress. However, filler counting should not become your main goal. A person could reduce fillers simply by saying very little. The deeper goals are clearer thought groups, more natural pauses, better sentence endings, easier recovery, and less mental pressure. So combine filler counting with other questions. Did I finish my sentences clearly? Did I pause at thought boundaries? Did I use simpler language when necessary? Did I restart cleanly? Did my answer have structure? Did I feel calmer than before? Those questions measure real control. A useful weekly drill is before and after speaking. On Monday, choose one topic and record yourself speaking for 2 minutes without special preparation. Keep the recording. During the week, practice the pause techniques with other topics. On Sunday, return to the original topic and record yourself again. Compare the two versions. Do not compare your accent. Listen only for flow. In the first recording, perhaps you hear many stretched sounds, repeated words, and unfinished sentences. In the second, you may hear clearer boundaries. Even if the vocabulary is almost identical, the speech can feel completely different. That comparison is powerful because progress in this area can be difficult to notice from day to day. Your mind remembers the mistakes you made today but forgets how much messier your speech sounded 3 weeks ago. Recordings give you evidence. Now let us build a more advanced drill. Filler-free 30 seconds. Choose a simple topic and speak for only 30 seconds with one rule. If you need time, you must pause. You are not allowed to use or meaningless repeated words. 30 seconds is short enough that you can focus intensely. If you succeed, move to 45 seconds, then 1 minute, then 90 seconds, then 2 minutes. Man and ho. This gradual increase matters because speaking stamina and filler control are connected. You may control fillers well for 20 seconds but lose the habit after 1 minute because your mental resources become tired. Longer practice teaches you to maintain organization beyond the beginning of the answer. During a long answer, you should also practice resetting. After each major idea, take a natural breath and mentally ask, "What is my next point?" That small reset can prevent the second half of your answer from becoming filler heavy. Another drill is pause and expand. Begin with a very short answer, then expand it one layer at a time. Question: do you enjoy reading? First version: yes, I do. Second version: yes, I do. I mostly read nonfiction. Third version: yes, I do. I mostly read nonfiction because I like learning practical ideas. Fourth version: yes, I do. I mostly read nonfiction because I like learning practical ideas. Recently, I have been reading more books about communication. Each version adds one clear thought. You are teaching your brain how to grow an answer without rushing. This is far more useful than trying to produce a long answer immediately. If learners regularly practice expansion, they develop a feeling for how ideas can be added in layers. That makes longer speaking less frightening. You should also train contrast speaking, because changing direction often produces fillers. Phrases such as, but, however, on the other hand, and at the same time, create new thought demands. Practice answers with two sides. I enjoy working from home because I can focus better. Pause. However, I sometimes miss talking to other people. Pause. So for me, a mix of home and office work would probably be best. Your brain learns to move from one direction to another cleanly. Without practice, that transition often sounds like, but, sometimes. Another important area is example speaking. Learners often say, for example, and then immediately realize they have not prepared an example. The result becomes, for example, train yourself to pause before the example marker. First decide the example, then say the phrase. Instead of, there are many reasons. For example, do this. There are many reasons. Pause and choose one. For example, some learners understand grammar well but rarely use English outside lessons. The rule is simple. Do not open a language structure before you have at least a basic idea of how to finish it. The same applies to the reason is. The biggest problem is there are two reasons, and what I mean is. These are useful frames, but they become filler traps when you use them before the content is ready. You can train this using frame completion drills. Write 10 sentence starters. Before you say one aloud, silently prepare the key idea that will complete it. The main reason is prepare lack of practice. Then speak the whole phrase. The main reason is lack of practice. Do not say the frame first and search afterward. This trains a very important timing skill. Content first, frame second. Another strong drill is short answer, clean answer. Learners sometimes believe every question requires a long response, so they begin stretching answers after the useful content is finished. Fillers appear because they are trying to create extra material that is not necessary. Practice answering some questions in only 2 sentences. What kind of music do you like? I mostly listen to calm music when I work. I also enjoy upbeat music when I exercise. Stop. What do you usually do on Sundays? I spend most of the day with my family. In the evening, I usually prepare for the week. Stop. This exercise teaches you that fluency does not mean producing the maximum number of words. Sometimes a clean short answer is stronger than a long, messy one. Then practice the opposite with planned longer answers. Choose a topic and decide 3 points before you begin. For example, why do I want to improve my English? Points: career, travel, confidence. Then speak for 2 minutes using those 3 anchors. Because the main directions are already chosen, you can focus on connecting ideas and controlling pauses. This helps separate idea planning from language production. Eventually, you will need both abilities: short, spontaneous answers and longer, structured responses. One training mistake you should avoid is practicing only in your head. Silent preparation can help, but filler control is partly physical. Your mouth needs to experience closing during the pause instead of making sound. Your breath needs to experience stopping naturally. Your voice needs to learn sentence endings, so speak aloud. Even 10 minutes of audible practice can train things that silent thinking cannot. If you cannot speak loudly, use a quiet voice, but let the mouth produce the language and let the pauses physically happen. Another mistake is practicing only by reading. Reading aloud can teach rhythm and pausing, but reading does not create the same retrieval challenge as spontaneous speech because the words are already available. Use reading as support, then move quickly into speaking without text. For example, read a short paragraph aloud with clean pauses. Then close the paragraph and explain the same idea in your own words. Now your brain has to retrieve language while maintaining the rhythm you just practiced. This creates a useful bridge between model speech and spontaneous speech. You can also use shadow and pause practice. Listen to a confident speaker for a short section and pay attention specifically to their silences. Do not only copy pronunciation, notice where they stop between ideas, where they breathe, and how long they wait before continuing. Then shadow the same passage, copying the pauses as carefully as the words. After that, talk about the same topic in your own words and try to keep a similar sense of space. This is valuable because learners often hear fluent speech and notice only the words. They do not notice that strong speakers also use silence. Once your ear begins noticing pauses, your idea of fluency changes. You stop imagining fluency as uninterrupted sound and begin hearing it as controlled movement between sound and silence. There is another very useful exercise called the silent filler drill. Speak normally, but every time you feel an coming, allow yourself to make the filler silently inside your mind while keeping your mouth closed. For example, instead of saying, I think, the problem is time, you mentally experience the hesitation but produce, I think, silence, the problem is time. This can be a helpful transition because the thinking habit may still exist internally, but the mouth begins learning not to express it as sound. Over time, even the internal filler often becomes unnecessary because the brain learns to use the silent moment more efficiently. Another training method is question repetition with improvement. Answer the same question 5 times, but give each attempt a different goal. Question: what is one skill everyone should learn? Attempt 1. Speak naturally and observe fillers. Attempt 2. Focus on the starting pause. Attempt 3. Focus on ending each thought completely. Attempt 4. Focus on preparing the next direction before continuing. Attempt 5. Combine everything and speak naturally. The final attempt often feels much smoother because you have separated the skills before integrating them. This method is useful because trying to fix everything at once can overwhelm you. One session can focus on starting pauses, another on thought boundaries, another on recovery, another on vocabulary flexibility. Over time, the individual skills begin joining together. You should also practice with different emotional states. Fillers are often more common when you feel nervous, excited, uncertain, or eager to impress. If you only practice calm topics in a relaxed voice, the habit may return strongly when emotion increases. Choose a topic you care about and speak with more energy. Tell a funny story. Explain something that annoyed you. Defend an opinion. Notice whether your speed increases and fillers return. If they do, slow the emotional energy without removing it. Keep the feeling, but control the rhythm. For example, instead of rushing, "I was so angry because, they told me," say, "I was genuinely angry." Pause. "They had promised to call me, but nobody contacted me." The emotion remains, but the message stays clear. This is important because controlled speech should not become flat speech. You do not want to remove personality. You want to remove unnecessary noise while keeping emotion, humor, warmth, and energy. There is also a difference between useful discourse markers and fillers. Words such as well, actually, so, I mean, and you know can be completely natural when they perform a real function. The goal of drills is not to delete them from your vocabulary. For example, "Well, I'm not completely sure" can sound natural because well softens the response. "Actually, I changed my mind" uses actually to show contrast. "So, what happened next" uses so to move the conversation forward. But if every answer begins with so, actually, the words are no longer doing specific work. A useful practice is to take one discourse marker and create 5 sentences where it genuinely adds meaning. Then create 5 sentences where it is unnecessary and remove it. This helps you develop awareness instead of fear. For example, "Actually, I have already tried that." Useful. "Actually, yesterday I went to the store." May be unnecessary unless you are correcting something. "I mean, the idea is good, but the timing is wrong." Useful clarification. "I mean, I went home." Probably filler. You are learning to ask, "Is this word communicating, or is it hiding my thinking?" Another powerful habit is post-speaking reflection. After a practice session, do not simply say good or bad. Choose one moment where you handled a pause well and one moment where the filler habit returned. For the successful moment, ask, "What helped me?" Maybe you knew your next point. Maybe you finished the sentence before thinking again. Maybe you slowed down. For the difficult moment, ask, "What triggered the filler?" Maybe the question was unexpected. Maybe you searched for advanced vocabulary. Maybe the sentence became too long. This turns every practice session into useful data. You can even keep a small filler journal with 3 columns: situation, trigger, replacement. Opinion question, no idea ready, starting pause. Forgot vocabulary, searched too long, describe around the word. Long sentence, lost structure, stop and restart. After a week, patterns become visible. If most fillers come from vocabulary searching, spend more time on paraphrasing drills. If they come from long answers, train thought units and structure. If they appear before your first sentence, train starting pauses. If they increase under pressure, practice more random questions. This makes your training targeted instead of generic. Now let us talk about repetition, because this is where automaticity is truly built. One good practice session may create awareness, but repeated sessions create behavior. You need enough clean repetitions that your brain begins expecting the new pattern. Suppose you answer 20 questions over several days, and every time you pause before the first sentence, instead of saying after enough repetitions, that pause begins feeling normal. The first question in a real conversation arrives, and your brain has a stronger chance of using the same pattern.
Speeding and after 10.
Suppose you practice stopping after every complete thought for 10 minutes a day. After several weeks, your sentences begin landing more naturally because the mouth has experienced hundreds of clean endings. Suppose you practice describing missing vocabulary instead of freezing. The next time a word disappears in a real conversation, your brain does not feel trapped. It already knows another route. This is what makes drills powerful. You are rehearsing the exact response you want your brain to use later. But repetition should remain meaningful. If you answer the same easy question in exactly the same way 100 times, your brain may memorize one speech rather than build flexible control. Repeat the skill across different content. Practice a clean starting pause with 20 different questions. Practice recovery with many different missing word situations. Practice 3-part answers on several topics. Practice clean endings in stories, opinions, explanations, and daily conversations. The behavior stays the same while the language changes. This is how you create a flexible habit. One of the best weekly progressions looks like this. During the first few days, practice very slowly and exaggerate the pauses. Then begin using more natural timing. After that, add unexpected questions. Then add longer answers. Finally, practice with another person or simulate real pressure through recording and timers. Each stage adds one difficulty. Do not skip directly from understanding the concept to demanding perfect performance in conversation. A new speaking habit needs stages. At the end of each week, choose one old recording and compare it with a new one. Listen not only for fewer fillers but for more control. Does the voice sound calmer? Are sentences easier to follow? Are there cleaner endings? Are you allowing ideas to breathe? Are you recovering faster when something goes wrong? Those changes are signs that the new habit is moving deeper. You may even notice something interesting. Your speech can sound more confident even before your vocabulary or grammar improves significantly. That happens because listeners respond strongly to rhythm and organization. A simple sentence spoken clearly can sound stronger than an advanced sentence filled with hesitation. Compare. From my perspective, the most significant factor is, with I think the biggest factor is experience. The second sentence is simpler but it lands. This should teach you not to confuse sophistication with control. There is also a psychological benefit to drills. Every successful pause gives your brain evidence that silence is safe. Every clean restart gives you evidence that mistakes are recoverable. Every vocabulary gap you explain around gives you evidence that forgetting one word does not destroy communication. Confidence grows from these experiences. It is difficult to convince yourself to be confident through motivation alone. But when you answer 50 questions and discover that you can survive pauses, missing words, restarts, and imperfect grammar, your confidence becomes more practical. You begin trusting your ability to recover. That trust is extremely important because filler-heavy speech is often connected to fear of losing control. Once you know you can regain control, the fear becomes smaller. This is also why you should deliberately practice small mistakes. During a drill, begin a sentence, then stop and restart. Pretend you forgot a word and explain around it. Pause for 2 seconds before continuing. Teach yourself that none of these events is dangerous. The more normal recovery becomes in practice, the less dramatic it feels in real conversation. Now let us create one complete 15-minute filler control session. For the first 2 minutes, warm up with easy sentences. Speak about what you did today. Focus only on clean sentence endings. For the next 3 minutes, answer 3 random questions. Give yourself a starting pause before every answer. For the next 3 minutes, practice a 3-part response: point, reason, example. For the next 2 minutes, do vocabulary gap training. Choose random objects or ideas and describe them without naming them. For the next 3 minutes, speak for 1 minute at a time on different topics while replacing every filler urge with silence. For the final 2 minutes, reflect on the recording. Find one successful pause and one difficult moment. That is enough for a serious daily session. If you have more time, extend the random question section and practice one longer 2-minute answer. If you have less time, do only 5 minutes. 1 minute of clean stops, 2 random questions, 1 minute of filler-free speaking, and 1 minute of reflection. The important thing is repeated contact. Do not wait until you can practice perfectly. A short focused session repeated often will usually help more than one giant session followed by a week of nothing. There is one more important rule. Practice the replacement, not the prohibition. If you spend 10 minutes repeating, do not say do not say Your attention remains focused on the filler. You may even become more aware of it and more anxious. Instead, train positive instructions. Finish the thought, pause, breathe, prepare one idea, continue. These commands tell your brain what action to perform. That difference matters. The old habit says, when thinking becomes difficult, make sound. The new habit says, when thinking becomes difficult, create space. That is what you are installing through repetition. Eventually, you will begin noticing the change during ordinary conversation. Someone asks you a question, and instead of immediately saying, you stay silent for 1 second, you answer. Halfway through, you need another idea. Instead of stretching you finish the sentence, you breathe, then you continue. You may barely notice the moment, but it is important. That is automaticity beginning. Later, a word disappears. Instead of freezing, you describe it. Later, your sentence becomes too complicated. Instead of fighting it, you restart. Later, you finish your answer and stop, instead of adding so, yeah, you know. These changes may seem small individually, but together they completely change the feeling of your speech. You sound less rushed because you are no longer running away from silence. You sound clearer because each thought has a boundary. You feel calmer because you know how to recover. You need fewer fillers because your brain has more useful responses available. This is the real goal of drills. You are not trying to produce perfect speech inside a practice session. You are giving your brain hundreds of examples of a better speaking pattern. The old pattern has history. It has been repeated for months or years. Give the new pattern time. Do not judge it after 2 days. If you still say, continue training. If pressure brings the old habit back, continue training under slightly more pressure. If one exercise feels too easy, increase the challenge. If it feels impossible, reduce the difficulty. Strong practice is adjustable. And remember that the goal is not silence for its own sake. A person who pauses every 3 words can sound just as unnatural as someone who fills every gap. Your pauses should gradually become part of meaningful rhythm. They should appear before an answer when thought is needed, between complete ideas during recovery, or before a change of direction. As the new habit becomes stronger, you will need fewer deliberate pauses because your phrase retrieval will also become faster. Some spaces that once required 2 seconds may require only half a second. Some answers will begin immediately because the idea is already ready. Some sentences will connect smoothly because the next phrase has become automatic. That is progress. You are not forcing yourself to pause forever. You are using pauses as training wheels while your speaking system becomes more organized. Eventually, your English begins finding its own balance between speech and silence. And that balance is what controlled speaking really sounds like. A controlled speaker is not constantly thinking, do not use a filler. They are focused on the message because their speaking habits support them. They finish ideas naturally. They pause when necessary. They retrieve familiar frames. They simplify when needed. They recover without panic. Their attention is free to communicate. That freedom is where you are heading. So for now, make the training simple and serious. Record yourself. Notice your filler triggers. Practice clean stops. Use random questions. Build 3-part answers. Describe missing words. Restart weak sentences. Practice clear endings. Increase the pressure gradually. Repeat these behaviors until your mouth begins choosing them without being reminded. Because knowing that silence is safe is useful, but experiencing it hundreds of times is what changes the habit. Knowing that you can restart is useful. Restarting successfully again and again is what builds trust. Knowing that you can speak without is useful.
Training your mouth to pause whenever wants to appear is what makes that ability available in real conversation. And this brings us to the next stage, because practice alone is not the final test. You can become excellent at controlled speaking in your room and still feel the old pressure when another person is standing in front of you, waiting for an answer. Real conversation introduces speed, eye contact, unexpected questions, interruptions, forgotten words, emotional pressure, and the fear of being judged. That is where your new habit must learn to survive. In the next chapter, we will take everything you have practiced and move it into real-time speaking. You will learn how to stay calm when someone asks you something unexpectedly, how to hold your place in the conversation without filling every second, how to recover when your thought disappears, and how to keep speaking with control even when you do not have the perfect answer ready. Because the real victory is not producing a filler-free recording when you are alone. The real victory is being inside a live conversation, needing time to think, feeling the old rising, and realizing that you no longer have to obey it. Chapter 6. Stay calm and keep control when you need time to think. Practicing alone is easier because nobody is waiting for your answer. You can pause, restart, repeat a sentence, and take as much time as you need. Real conversation feels different. Someone asks you something unexpectedly, looks at you, and waits. Suddenly, the same 1-second pause you used comfortably during practice can feel much longer. This is where your old filler habit often returns. Someone asks, "What do you think about working abroad?" Your first thought is not ready, and your mouth immediately tries to protect you. I think, The problem is not only English now. The problem is pressure.
You feel that the other person expects an answer immediately. You feel that silence may make you look unsure. You may even believe that if you pause too long, the other person will think your English is weak. But real speaking control begins when you stop treating the listener's attention like a countdown. You are allowed to think. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to begin with a simple answer instead of the perfect one. If the question is difficult, you can take 1 second and say, "I think it depends on the situation." Now you have entered the answer. Then pause. For some people, working abroad creates better opportunities. Pause again. But being far from family can also be difficult. You did not need the whole response at the beginning. You only needed enough control to enter the conversation without panic. This is one of the strongest habits you can build in real-time speaking. Answer with the first clear thought, not the first available sound. That means when the question comes, do not let win the first second automatically. Give yourself a tiny space, then choose a simple opening. Someone asks, "Why do people find English speaking difficult?" Instead of, because, try. "I think fear is a big reason." That sentence gives your brain somewhere to stand. Now you can continue. People may know enough English, but they become too worried about mistakes. The simple opening reduces pressure because the conversation has already started with meaning. Another common real-life problem happens when your answer is going well and then the next idea suddenly disappears. You say, "I think learning English is easier when you practice every day because," then nothing comes. The old habit says, The controlled response is different. Finish what you can. "I think learning English is easier when you practice every day." Pause, then ask yourself silently, what is my next point? Maybe the next idea is consistency. Regular practice keeps the language active in your mind. You do not need to force an unfinished sentence forward. You can close it and start again. This is especially useful when you are speaking under pressure because unfinished sentences create more pressure than finished ones. A finished sentence gives you a fresh beginning. There is another moment that causes fillers, when someone asks you for a longer answer than you expected. Maybe they ask, "What are the advantages and disadvantages of social media?" You have one idea ready, but not 5. Do not try to sound impressive by speaking continuously. Give yourself a simple structure. "I think there are both good and bad sides." Pause. One advantage is communication. It helps people stay connected. Pause. The biggest disadvantage, in my opinion, is that people can waste a lot of time on it. Now you already have a complete answer. If another idea comes, add it. If not, stop. That is important. You do not need to continue speaking just because silence has arrived. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is finish. Real-time control also means learning what to do when you forget the exact word. Suppose you say, "I bought a new, you cannot remember headphones." Do not keep searching while the listener waits. Say, "I bought something new for listening to music." Maybe the word comes back a second later. Headphones. This kind of recovery is powerful because it teaches you that a missing word is a small problem, not a conversation-ending problem. The same thing works with more abstract vocabulary. If you forget flexible, you can say, "It gives you more freedom to change your schedule." If you forget frustrated, you can say, "I was really annoyed because nothing was working." The meaning stays alive. And once meaning stays alive, your confidence stays stronger. Another pressure point is disagreement. When someone says something you do not agree with, you may need time to organize your response. Because you want to sound polite and clear, your brain starts working harder. You hear yourself saying, actually, I don't. A better strategy is to use one familiar response frame. "I see your point, but I think there is another side." Now pause. Then explain the side. Some people need more structure, so working from home may not be ideal for everyone. The frame gives your brain time and gives the listener a clear signal that disagreement is coming. This is not filler because the phrase has a purpose. That is the difference you should always remember. A useful phrase helps communication. An empty filler only covers thinking time. You can build a few response frames for real conversations so you are not creating everything from zero. For agreement, I agree with that, especially because, for partial agreement, I agree to some extent, but, for uncertainty, I'm not completely sure, but I think. For a difficult question, let me think about that for a second. For clarification, what do you mean exactly? For restarting, let me say that differently. These phrases can protect you under pressure because they give the conversation structure. But do not use them mechanically. If every answer begins with, "Let me think about that," then the phrase becomes another filler. Use it when it genuinely helps. Sometimes silence is better. Another real-life problem appears when the other person interrupts you. You may be explaining something, they jump in, and then they give the conversation back to you. Now you have forgotten where you were. This is a classic filler moment. Yeah, so, what was I saying? Instead of panicking, use a restart point. I was saying that the biggest issue is time. Now you have recovered the main idea. Or, the point I was making is that regular practice matters. These phrases are useful because they take you back to the message instead of forcing you to remember the exact sentence you were saying before the interruption. You do not need to recover every word. Recover the idea. This is a powerful rule for all real-time speaking. Protect the idea, not the sentence. If the sentence breaks, rebuild it. If the word disappears, describe it. If the structure becomes too complicated, simplify it. If the conversation changes direction, follow the meaning. This flexibility is what keeps fillers from taking over. You also need to understand that eye contact can increase pressure. When someone is looking directly at you, silence may feel more uncomfortable than it does during solo practice. One simple solution is not to treat eye contact as a test. You can look at the person, pause naturally, and think. You do not need to stare intensely while searching for words. A small natural glance away can also happen while thinking. People do this in every language. The important thing is that your body remains calm. If your body panics, your mouth usually panics too. So when a difficult question arrives, use a small physical reset. Breathe out. Relax your jaw. Let your shoulders drop slightly. Then answer. This can sound too simple, but speaking pressure is not only in your vocabulary, it can also appear in your body. A tense body creates rushed speech. Rushed speech creates less thinking time. Less thinking time creates more fillers. So calmness is not separate from speaking control. It supports it. Here is a practical real-time exercise. Ask a friend, classmate, or speaking partner to ask you 10 random questions. Your only rule is this: before every answer, give yourself one clean moment. Do not begin with You may answer immediately if the idea is ready, but if it is not, pause. Then begin with one clear sentence. Do not aim for long answers at first. For example, what is one habit you want to improve? Pause. I want to stop checking my phone so often. Then add another sentence if you want. I notice that it breaks my concentration. That is enough. After a few questions, increase the answer length. Now try 2 or 3 thought units. The goal is to carry your clean pause habit into a real interaction. Another powerful practice is the unexpected question drill. Have someone ask questions you have not prepared. If you practice alone, write questions on paper, mix them, and choose one randomly. The goal is not to answer perfectly. The goal is to practice the feeling of not knowing immediately. That feeling is exactly what triggers fillers in real life. You need to become comfortable with the moment when the answer is still forming. For example, if you could change one thing about your city, what would it be? Maybe you truly do not know. Do not rush. Pause. I would probably improve public transport. Now you have direction. Then continue. Traffic is a big problem, so better transport could help a lot. You have just trained a real speaking reflex. Uncertainty did not create filler. Uncertainty created thought. There is another situation you should prepare for: losing confidence after one mistake. You say the wrong tense or pronounce a word badly, and suddenly your whole speaking rhythm collapses. You begin thinking about the mistake. Then, the most important thing you can do is leave the mistake behind quickly. If the meaning is still clear, continue. If the mistake needs correction, correct it once and move on. Sorry, I went there yesterday. Continue. Do not create a second problem by mentally replaying the first one. A single grammar mistake is usually less damaging to communication than 30 seconds of nervous hesitation afterward. Your listener is often ready to move on long before you are. So learn to move on too. Controlled speaking means your mistakes do not take control of your next sentence. Now notice how different this is from trying to be perfect. A perfect speaker would never forget a word, never restart, never pause too long, and never make a grammar mistake. That person does not exist. A controlled speaker can handle all of those things without collapsing. That is the skill you want. You want to be able to say, I need a second. Pause, restart, simplify, clarify, continue. That is real conversational strength. Try one more exercise. Speak for 2 minutes about a topic you know, but create 3 artificial problems for yourself. First, deliberately stop in the middle and restart. Second, pretend you forgot a word and explain around it. Third, pause for 2 full seconds before your next point. This may feel strange, but you are training recovery on purpose. If recovery becomes familiar during practice, it will feel less frightening when it happens unexpectedly. The final thing to remember in real-time speaking is that the other person is usually listening for your message, not counting your pauses. You notice every hesitation because it is happening inside your own mind. The listener often notices much less. A short pause can feel enormous to you and completely normal to them, so do not judge your conversation from inside the pressure. Judge it by communication. Did your idea become clear? Did you stay in the conversation? Did you recover when something went wrong? Did you use fewer unnecessary fillers than before? Did you continue instead of freezing? Those are the signs of progress. The goal of the English filler trap has never been to turn you into a speaker who never needs time. The goal is to make thinking time feel manageable. When someone asks you something unexpectedly, you do not need to panic and fill the space. You can pause, choose one thought, say it clearly, let the next thought come. If something breaks, recover. If a word disappears, explain. If you finish, stop. That is speaking with control. And once you can do this with another person in front of you, the filler habit loses one of its strongest weapons: pressure. In the next and final chapter, we will turn everything you have learned into a simple daily system so this does not remain something you understand only while listening to this audiobook. You will build a routine that trains clean pauses, stronger phrase retrieval, faster recovery, and calmer real-time speaking until these skills begin becoming part of the way you naturally use English. Chapter 7. The Daily Filler-Free Speaking Routine. You now know why fillers appear, how silence can become useful, how to build your next phrase before your mouth rushes in, and how to recover when pressure makes your English harder. But none of these ideas will change your speaking if they remain only ideas. The final step is turning them into a routine simple enough to repeat until controlled speaking becomes your normal response. You do not need hours of practice. You need a short routine that repeatedly trains the exact moments where fillers usually appear: before you answer, between ideas, when a word disappears, when a sentence becomes too complicated, and when you finish speaking. Start with 10 to 15 minutes. For the first 2 minutes, practice clean beginnings. Ask yourself 5 simple questions such as, what did you do today? What are you working on right now? Or, what is one thing you want to improve? Before every answer, wait for one clean moment. Do not automatically begin with well, or you know. Prepare one simple first idea, then speak. If the question is, what is one thing you want to improve? Allow the silence first. Then say, I want to improve my speaking confidence. The exercise seems small, but you are training one of the most important moments in conversation: the space before your first sentence. Next, spend about 3 minutes practicing thought group speaking. Choose an easy topic and speak one complete idea at a time. If the topic is your daily routine, you might say, I usually start work around 9. Pause. I do my most difficult work in the morning. Pause. In the afternoon, I usually deal with smaller tasks. Do not count the pauses obsessively. The goal is simply to finish one idea before forcing out another. You are teaching your mouth that it does not have to keep producing sound while your brain organizes the next thought. Then spend 3 minutes on unexpected questions. Choose questions randomly so you cannot prepare the answers in advance. Give yourself 30 to 60 seconds for each answer. Use the skills you have built throughout this book. Prepare the first idea, speak in small thought units, pause at natural boundaries, and simplify whenever the sentence becomes difficult. Suppose the question is, would you rather work alone or with other people? You might begin, I prefer working alone when I need to concentrate. Pause. But I also enjoy working with other people when we are solving a difficult problem. You are not trying to sound brilliant. You are training yourself to stay organized while the answer is being created. After that, spend 2 minutes on recovery training. Deliberately create small problems. Pretend you have forgotten a word. Begin a sentence that becomes too complicated. Stop halfway and restart it more simply. For example, begin, one of the reasons that people who, then stop. Do not rescue the broken structure with restart. I think people struggle because they are afraid of mistakes, or pretend you have forgotten the word umbrella. Instead of freezing, explain it. It is the thing you carry when it rains. The goal is to teach your brain that difficulty has more than one exit. Finally, spend 2 or 3 minutes on free speaking. Choose one topic and speak naturally. Do not try to control every word. At this stage, bring the skills together and focus mainly on the message. If a filler appears, continue. If you feel another one coming, use the new response. Finish, pause, prepare, continue. That gives you a complete short routine. Clean beginnings, thought groups, unexpected questions, recovery, free speaking. You are training the whole filler problem instead of attacking only one word. If you have 20 to 30 minutes, go deeper. Record your free speaking section and listen back once. Do not analyze everything about your English. Ignore accent, pronunciation, and small grammar mistakes for this exercise. Listen specifically for hesitation. Where did the fillers appear? Did they appear before your first sentence? Did they appear when you searched for vocabulary? Did they appear because your answer had no structure? Did you keep saying "and" because you were afraid to finish? Did "you know" appear whenever you needed another idea? Once you find the trigger, choose tomorrow's practice accordingly. If your fillers mostly appear before answers, practice more starting pauses. If they appear inside long explanations, work on thought groups. If missing words create most of the problem, practice describing around vocabulary. If you begin well but lose control after 1 minute, train longer structured answers. Your routine should respond to your real weakness. This is much better than saying, "I need to stop saying That statement is too general. A stronger learner says, "My fillers usually appear when I have finished one idea but have not prepared the next one. That is what I am going to train." Now your mistake has become a training target. You should also create a small set of speaking frames that are easy for your mouth to retrieve. Do not collect 50 phrases. Choose perhaps 5 or 6 that solve common conversation problems. For giving an opinion, you might practice, "I think the main reason is." For explaining, "What I mean is." For giving an example, for example. For partial agreement, "I see your point, but." For a difficult question, "Let me think about that for a second." For restarting, "Let me say that differently." Practice them with different ideas so they become flexible rather than memorized speeches. The goal is to make useful structures easy to access when pressure appears. There is one important rule: do not open a sentence frame before you know its direction. If you say, "The biggest reason is," and then begin searching, you have created another filler trap. Prepare the key idea first. Perhaps the key idea is fear. Then say, "The biggest reason is fear of making mistakes." Content first, frame second. That timing alone can make your English feel much more controlled. You should also practice a 1-minute filler check once every few days. Choose the same type of topic and speak for 1 minute. Record it. Count roughly how often meaningless fillers appear, but do not become obsessed with the number. Suppose you used 15 fillers during your first recording. 2 weeks later, you use 9. That is useful evidence, but also notice whether the remaining speech has improved. Maybe your pauses are cleaner. Maybe your sentences end more clearly. Maybe you recover from forgotten words faster. Those changes matter even more than the number. Your real goal is not 0. Your goal is control. A natural speaker can occasionally say, "Well, I mean," or "you know." These words exist in normal conversation. The difference is that they do not control every thinking moment. You want to reach a point where you have options. Sometimes the answer comes immediately. Sometimes you pause. Sometimes you say, "Let me think about that." Sometimes you simplify. Sometimes you restart. Sometimes you use a natural discourse marker because it actually adds meaning. When you have options, you are no longer trapped. You should also review one previous practice recording every week. This is important because progress is easy to miss when you hear yourself every day. An old recording allows you to compare the rhythm of your speech. Perhaps 1 month ago you said, "I think, the problem is, people are, afraid." Now you hear yourself say, "I think the biggest problem is fear of mistakes." Pause. People often know what they want to say, but they hesitate because they want the sentence to be perfect. Your vocabulary may not have changed dramatically, but your delivery has. That matters. Clearer rhythm changes how your English feels to the listener and how it feels inside your own mind. There will also be days when the fillers suddenly return. Maybe you are tired. Maybe you are speaking to someone important. Maybe the topic is difficult. Maybe you are nervous. Do not treat that day as proof that you have lost your progress. Automatic habits are not perfectly stable while they are being rebuilt. Under pressure, the brain sometimes returns to old patterns. When that happens, return to the basic sequence. Finish the thought. Pause, breathe, prepare one small idea, continue. Do not try to repair an entire conversation at once. Win one moment, then win the next one. If you are extremely busy, use a 5-minute version of the routine. Answer 2 unexpected questions with clean beginnings. Speak for 1 minute using clear thought groups. Practice 1 vocabulary recovery, then finish with 1 minute of free speaking. 5 focused minutes is better than waiting for the perfect 30-minute session that never happens. The skill grows through repeated contact. You can also bring this training into ordinary life without creating a formal study session. When someone asks you a question in English, notice the first second. When you send a voice message, notice where fillers appear. When you practice alone while walking, finish each thought cleanly. When you speak in a meeting or class, use 1 deliberate pause instead of hiding the moment with sound. These small real-world repetitions are valuable because eventually you need the skill outside your practice routine. Over time, something begins to change. At first, you have to remind yourself, do not rush. Then you begin naturally waiting before difficult answers. At first, you consciously think, finish the sentence. Later, your sentences begin landing by themselves. At first, you deliberately replace with silence. Later, the silence feels normal. At first, forgetting a word creates panic. Later, your brain automatically searches for another way to express the meaning. That is the progression you are looking for. You are moving from conscious technique toward automatic control. Do not rush that progression. The filler habit may have been repeated thousands of times. Give the new behavior enough repetitions to become strong. And remember that the deeper transformation is not simply that your speech becomes cleaner. Your relationship with thinking changes. Before this training, needing time may have made you feel that something was wrong. You believed that the listener was waiting. The silence was dangerous and your mouth needed to rescue you. You can let the next thought arrive without covering the space with noise. That changes the entire emotional experience of speaking English. You begin listening to your own ideas instead of constantly monitoring your mistakes. You become less desperate to produce the next word. You stop trying to prove fluency every second. And when the pressure becomes smaller, your language often comes more easily. There is an interesting paradox here. The more desperately you try never to stop, the less controlled your speech can become. But when you allow yourself permission to pause, your English often begins flowing more naturally. Silence gives the next thought somewhere to arrive. That may be the most important lesson in this entire book. So make your daily routine simple enough that you will actually do it. Practice the moments that trigger fillers. Record yourself occasionally. Notice patterns without attacking yourself. Build useful sentence frames. Practice recovery. Increase pressure slowly. Carry the skill into real conversations. Do not ask every day, have I completely removed fillers yet? Ask, did I control more thinking moments today? That is a better measure. One controlled pause is progress. One clean restart is progress. One forgotten word that does not destroy your sentence is progress. One answer where you stop when you are finished instead of adding so, yeah, is progress. These small moments become your new speaking style when they are repeated often enough. And now you have reached the final lesson of the English filler trap. The goal was never to make your English perfectly silent between words. The goal was to teach you that you do not have to make noise while your mind is working. Your pause can carry confidence. Your silence can organize meaning. Your breath can reset the sentence. Your next phrase can arrive without panic, and your voice can continue when it is ready. That is the golden truth of this method. Fluent speaking is not the absence of thinking time. Fluent speaking is learning how to use thinking time without losing control. The next time someone asks you a question in English, there may still be a moment when your next thought does not arrive immediately. For a second, your mind may search, your old habit may still want to say, but now that moment means something different. Before, you thought the silence was the problem. You believed that if your mouth stopped, your fluency disappeared, so you rushed to cover every gap with sound. Now you know better. That small space is not where your English fails, it is where your next thought is being built. You have learned that fillers often appear when your mouth moves before your idea is ready, when you try to build the perfect sentence, when you search too long for one word, when you stretch one thought instead of finishing it, or when you become uncomfortable with silence. And you have learned a different response. Finish the thought, pause, breathe, choose the next small idea, continue. That simple sequence can change the entire feeling of your speech. You do not need to speak every second to sound confident. You do not need to hide every moment of thinking. You do not need to build complicated sentences just to prove that your English is advanced. Sometimes the strongest answer is the simplest one delivered with control. Someone asks you for your opinion. You pause. I think there are 2 reasons. You explain the first. Pause. You explain the second. Nothing is missing. The silence is helping your message. A word disappears. You do not panic. You explain it another way. A sentence becomes too complicated. You stop and restart. Someone interrupts you. You return to the main idea. You finish your answer. And instead of saying, so, yeah, you know, you simply stop. That is not weak English. That is control. There is also something deeper you should carry with you after this book. You were never trying to become a person who never hesitates. Every human being needs time to think. Even confident speakers stop, search, change direction, restart sentences, and sometimes use fillers. Your goal is different. Your goal is to stop letting hesitation decide what your mouth does next. That is the transformation. Before, hesitation automatically created noise. Now hesitation can create space. Before, forgetting one word could break the whole sentence. Now you know that meaning has more than one path. Before, a difficult question made you rush into the first sound available. Now you can wait until the first clear thought is ready. Before, you tried to hold the floor by constantly speaking. Now you understand that sometimes silence holds the floor more confidently than ever could. And this is where practice matters. Do not finish the English filler trap and only remember the ideas. Use them today. Choose 3 simple questions. Record yourself answering them. Before every answer, give yourself one clean moment. During the answer, finish one thought before starting another. If a word disappears, explain around it. If you lose the sentence, restart. And when the answer is complete, stop. Do not aim for perfection. Aim for one conversation that feels more controlled than the last one. Then do it again tomorrow. Because the new speaking habit will not arrive through one powerful sentence in an audiobook. It will arrive through hundreds of small moments when your old filler habit appears and you choose something better. One pause instead of One simple sentence instead of a complicated unfinished one. One clean restart instead of 5 nervous sounds. One calm breath instead of rushing. Those moments may look small, but together they retrain the rhythm of your English. Eventually, something begins to shift. You stop noticing every silence. You stop feeling that 1 second is too long. Your sentences begin ending more clearly. Your next idea has more time to arrive. You recover faster. And because your mind is no longer fighting to fill every gap, you have more attention available for the thing that actually matters, what you want to say. That is where speaking becomes lighter. You are no longer performing fluency, you are communicating. And that is a much stronger place to speak from. If the English filler trap helped you understand your speaking in a new way, subscribe to English Mindset Academy and continue training with us. And in the comments, write, I control the pause. Let that sentence become more than a comment. Use it as a reminder the next time pressure appears. You do not need to defeat silence. You need to know what to do inside it. Let your thought arrive. Let your sentence breathe. Let your words come when they are ready. Because strong English is not a voice that never stops. It is a voice that knows exactly when to speak, when to pause, and how to continue without losing control.